Welcome to this sample audio clip, which comes from the series entitled Multihull Conversations with Jim Brown. In this segment, Jim speaks to multi-hull sailor and self-boat builder Kirk Fuller. Kirk shares a sailing story here about what happened during the delivery of a Searunner catamaran for a client down in the Caribbean. In the complete audio, Kirk shares about what he has seen over the years among those who are a part of the multi-hull community, including the strong desire among many in the do-it-yourself side of this group to build things such as their own boats and even family domiciles. You can find out more about this historic audio series at www.outrigmedia.com.
I bet you have some incidents that pop to mind first when you start thinking about the wacky things that happen in a boatsman's life. Can you think of one?
When you're sitting around in a group and your people are throwing out ideas, you come up with little things that don't occur to you when somebody asks you, "Hey, tell us a good one."
Yeah.
I don't know. That delivery of one of your 50-foot constant camber cats from Charleston in about 95 or so. Yeah, 95-ish. We headed out in midwinter. It was kind of a dumb time of year to leave. I think it was, and we got out in front of a big front, and we had enough fuel to try to get across the Gulf Stream in light air before the wind went north. And so we, and it was freezing cold up there. We'd hauled the boat out and bottom painted it and stuff, and then we're get the show on the road. And here comes this front. So we blasted out of there and made it most of the way across the Gulf Stream before the wind went north. So we missed the worst of the real nasty northern winds hitting the southern, northern moving Gulf Stream. But we caught the trailing edge of it, which blew the bottom out of the sled on the boat that had the two Honda 50s on it. This was just a big open beach cat. No cabin, nowhere to stand out of the sun or anything. It was a 13-day trip on an open boat. But the boat handled fine, except for the sled bottom, and the sled became a scoop. It would fire green water into the steering station onto the cracked compass face and radio waves, things like that. But we were out there and we had to stand watch in a wetsuit basically for 3 or 4 days until we dove south. But the boat just performed magnificently. It just was no big deal at all. It was just washing machine water for 24 hours, and then we hung a right and headed south to stay in front of it, keep it behind us, and get further south. And then we wrestled our way through the doldrums, working all the way across to the east to where you can then turn south and ride, go crosswise to the trade winds to get down to Puerto Rico. That's the way you have to do that. Head out toward Bermuda and then turn right and come in from the north. You can't just beat all the way out there. So that worked out all right. Boat's holding up good. It's noisy. It got warmer. And as soon as oddly enough, when we went back and charted it on the map, as soon as we got out of the eastern edge of the Bermuda Triangle, if you draw that on a map, it's between the Fajardo Lighthouse and Bermuda and Miami, the trade winds filled in from the east, and we smoked down, went around Culebra, as a matter of fact, through the channel between there and St. Thomas, and then had to go, downwind to Fajardo about 15 miles and pulled in on a nice Sunday morning. Shoals of flying fish, and it's just wonderful to be down out of that 13 days later. And we got in, and everybody was happy. New people on the dock from Santa Barbara, things like that. Multihull community. Hey, what's going on? And a few days later, the Coast Guard comes by, and it turns out one of the kid on the boat during some of the rough part of the Gulf Stream crossing had called the Coast Guard, and I came up on deck and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well," he was freaking out, is what he was doing, and so a few hours later, a C-130 buzzed over us, and I guess they'd had 100-knot winds or something, 200 or 300 miles north of us, but we were having no problems at all. I said, "What do you? We still have our rig. We can't motor except in calm water, and we can still motor in calm water. And there's nothing wrong here. Why did you call? Why would you do that?" Well, we get down there, and we're in Fajardo for a few days, and the Coast Guard comes by, and some very knowledgeable, big, gruff Coast Guard guys, and they say, "Well, how did you get here?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "You couldn't sail that thing here. You must have motored." And I said, "Come here and look at the motor mount." We didn't motor. We sailed. He said, "You sailed that thing all the way down here through that nasty weather?" I said, "Yep, that's the only way we're going to get here." And they scratched their heads and wandered off. But we passed a few flailing monohulls, lead mines as we call them, on the way down that were rolling rail to rail in these big following seas at some point in the trip, and we're just scooting along, being steered by a tiller mast to the 4x4 that was the steering device on this open boat, and it was just amazing, the seakeeping ability of one of these big cats. So there's a story.
Yeah, that's a good one, Kirk. I think maybe we should explain that your use of the term sled refers to a type of outboard motor mount that's used in some multi-hulls. It's a contraption that fastens up underneath the wing that sort of looks like a sled, except it has sides on it and a transom in the back end of it to which the motors themselves attach. And so you're saying that the waves beat the bottom out of that sled, eh? And that turned it into a scoop. The transom was open to drag in the sea when the wave crest had come up and just throw water up into the helm's position.
Yep, it was pretty nice. we had to. Luckily, we had some bag sails, and so we had to pack that whole thing full around the engines and stuff, full of these sail bags, and lash them all down to dry out our steering station.
My God. Well, one problem with the sled type of outboard bracket is that it does reduce the underwing clearance. That is, it hangs down from the bottom of the underwing, and normally those Searunner cats have a high enough underwing to avoid much of any pounding, but when you reduce that clearance by the thickness of the outboard sled, of course, you're asking for it. But charter boats, that thing was a charter boat, and they don't normally go out in conditions with a load of passengers where they're going to pound the daylights out of the bottom of the sled. But just to get the thing delivered down there, you guys had to go through that. I'm glad you didn't lose the motors.
Yeah, me too. And those motors are still working, as far as I know. And guys in Fajardo, yeah.
They must have gotten pretty wet.
They were underwater for days, and that's what these guys said. Well, how did you motor in?